name is Casey Dexter Lee, and I'm an interpreter with California State Parks. I'm here at Angel Island State Park today, and we're going to be talking about our World War II history. This site was a detention facility for prisoners of war, as well as Japanese Americans, particularly Japanese Hawaiians, that were interned during World War II. And I'm in one of the barracks, and this room has bunk beds in it. There were 3 stacked bunk beds so that there could be more people in the space. This room was considered healthy for 25 to 30 people and had 50 to 60 beds in it, so 2 to 3 times the healthy capacity. This facility was operational from the end of 1941 until 1946, when at the end of the war, the prisoners of war were repatriated, and Japanese Americans that had passed through here had already been sent on to other internment camps throughout the United States. And I'm here today with Marissa, and Marissa is a Girl Scout from South San Jose. She's currently working on her Gold Award, which is the highest award a Girl Scout can earn. She is working to educate the public on Japanese incarceration during World War II through informational webinars and news articles. Marissa has researched and interviewed 4 families of Japanese incarcerees from Angel Island and written articles about their ancestors' experiences during the war, which were posted on the Angel Island Immigration Station Foundation's Immigrant Voices website. Her final goal is to work with the Angel Island Immigration Station Foundation to create a traveling exhibit about the Japanese detained here. So Marissa, I have some questions for you about your project. And first of all, I'd like to start off by asking, can you tell us what inspired you to research this?
I was inspired to start this project because of things I've noticed growing up in a Japanese American community and just with my own family in general. As a girl, I used to always be very connected to my heritage. I used to take traditional Japanese dance classes in the San Jose Japantown. I took it for about 2 years before my instructor, she ended up passing away. She was only 50 or so at the time, but because all of the elders in our community were starting to age and pass on, there wasn't anyone who was willing to take up the role of instructor, and so we had to close the school down, which was really sad because it was such an important part of our history, and my mom and my aunt had also been part of the school back when they were girls, so it really was quite important to me. I also noticed things with my own family that actually quite surprised me. My grandparents didn't really talk very much about the war years. My grandma was very young at the time. I think she was 3 when the Executive Order 9066 was passed and they had to relocate. But my grandpa was older, and his family, his siblings still remember a lot of what happened, but they didn't really talk about it with us because it's kind of part of Japanese, I want to say it's part of Japanese culture not to talk about bad things. Everyone tries to remember the good things that happened. They just kind of pass over the bad things like nothing happened. So because of that, a lot of the young people don't know anything about what happened during World War II. And the same thing happened with my family. Like, we didn't know until my mom and I sat down with my grandpa and his sister, and we had them tell us verbally what happened during the war. Because actually what happened was they ended up moving to, they ended up moving states. They moved out of California to avoid relocation. So I didn't know that, right? And I was like, whoa, I didn't know you could do that, but you could, because the Executive Order 9066 only applied to the West Coast, right? So they managed to escape inland, and they had to deal with a whole host of other problems because all the Japanese were at the time seen as the enemy. So them being one of the only Japanese American families who were still in society at the time, they had to deal with a lot of stuff from other people. So yeah, just the fact that they hadn't told us was something that really surprised me, and it made me realize how much or how little I knew about this history, or how little everyone else knew about this history. So that's really what inspired me to start this project.
Oh wow, that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Marissa. My next question is, can you share with us something that surprised you in the course of this project?
One thing that surprised me was how little I knew and how little everybody else knew. Like, I knew that we didn't know a whole lot, but I didn't realize just how much we didn't know. Just the other day, I found out that a lot of students who were interned in incarceration camps were actually allowed to leave. They were allowed to leave the camps, and they had to stay with host families while they were going to high school or college. That was such a surprising thing to me. Like, I didn't think that people were allowed to leave, except for maybe farm workers. Something else that surprised me was how little other Japanese and Japanese Americans didn't know about their history. I'm doing webinars to help educate the public, and a lot of the people who come to my webinars are actually other Japanese Americans because they're also interested in learning about World War II and the Japanese incarceration. I have a little survey that I have them take at the end where there's one question that asks what they learned and what they didn't know like beforehand. So I was surprised to know that a lot of Japanese Americans didn't actually know that Japanese from Hawaii were also interned on the mainland and in other camps in Hawaii. So I was surprised about that. And I was also surprised about how little they knew about the different types of internment camps, because there were different types. They weren't all the same. That's really what surprised me.
Yeah, Angel Island is one of those points that most people don't know about, even if they do know quite a bit about the incarceration of Japanese Americans. And that's because we were a pass-through site. People were really in transit when they were coming to Angel Island, mainly from Hawaii, on their way to those more permanent camps. And then, as you said, those were very diverse in their scope and purpose as well. My last question is, what do you want the public to know about this story?
One thing I want the public to know about the Japanese incarceration during World War II is that it hasn't stopped. It's still going on today. The problems that society faced back then are still very much evident in society today. For example, we see the whole Black Lives Matter movement or the whole movement against the Middle Eastern people after 9/11. All of these things are very similar to what the Japanese Americans faced before the war happened and before they were locked up or interned. I think that the Japanese American incarceration is a very clear example of what is going to happen if we continue down this path. Over 120,000 people were locked away. What's going to happen if we continue to be racist against other ethnic minorities? I just want people to know that despite the fact that a lot of Japanese have been able to escape the inherent discrimination that was felt in the past, a lot of other people aren't able to escape that today. If we continue doing this, we're just going to end up in a deeper hole.
If I can, I'd like to squeeze in one more question. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about one or more of the families that you got to speak with that have those connections to Angel Island and what their experiences and memories of this place were and how it affected their family.
One family I interviewed was the family of an incarcerated named Wakijiro Yuki. He was an immigrant from Japan, and he was arrested and placed in Department of Justice camps. And he passed through Angel Island as he was being transferred between other Department of Justice camps. He was arrested for taking his children to Japanese school. The government claimed that he hadn't filled out the proper paperwork when coming into the country. But that claim was completely false because the family actually managed to produce the piece of paper that he allegedly had never filled out. They didn't have any interest in proving any of these claims. They just had like a trial and a hearing to give the appearance that they were being fair, but really they weren't really being fair. He was arrested and he was sent to the county jail here in California. After that, he was sent off to Sharps Park and then Angel Island. The rest of his family they weren't arrested, but they were relocated to the Assembly Center in Pomona before being sent to Heart Mountain, Wyoming. His family was quite large at the time. His eldest daughter had already been married and had children herself. So it was really like two families that were being relocated. But because they were so big, they weren't able to stay together so much. One of them had to be quarantined for a little bit because one of the kids had measles or the smallpox or something. And they had to wait a little bit before going into Heart Mountain, so they didn't have an epidemic. A year before the war ended, like 1944, 45 or so, some of his family members did manage to reunite themselves with him at Crystal City, Texas, but they had already spent maybe 2-3 years apart. And it really did take a toll on his family, as I recalled his grandson and granddaughter talking to me about that.
Wow, it's amazing just how these events affected families for generations. I'm so happy to be able to speak with you. One of the, kind of highlights of working at a place like Angel Island is that there are always more stories to learn because of the complicated history here between this former immigration site, the World War II history, and beyond on both ends of those time periods. So we're very grateful to people like you that have found more information that you're able to share with us about the people that have connections to Angel Island. So thank you, Marissa, for the work that you're doing and helping teach us as well as teach others about the Japanese and Japanese American experience here in California. I want to say my goodbyes and thank everyone for joining us. And if you'd like to learn more, you can check out the Ports program with California State Parks and become a #Ports fan. All right, bye everyone.